is not equal to the desired initial state vector, as long as the system is stable, the states will eventually converge to the desired states. If you apply that specific kind of input.
Okay, sir. That means if we apply any torque that which is following the same equation as that
Hmm.
of the as that of our state, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Sir, then initial case. Okay, sir. My doubt is then initial case why x not why x will not be same as xd, because initially you have said na we are uh, we want to get theta to follow theta d. So initially theta naught equals to theta d at t
No,
equals
no,
to
no.
0.
Theta d is theta desired. Okay. See, let us say you imagine your regular pendulum itself. Okay. Left to itself, where will the pendulum hang? It will be at the bottom, theta equal to 0, when there is no torque applied, right? But suppose as part, let us say you use it as a robotic manipulator, and you want the theta to change from theta equal to 30 degrees to theta equal to 80 degrees or 45 degrees or whatever number. Okay. So you want that angle to change from point A to point B, where point A is 30 degrees. Okay. Initially, theta at time t equal to 0, which is theta naught, is 0 degrees. But theta desired at t equal to 0 is 30 degrees. Okay, so it will take some time for the pendulum to come from 0 degrees to 30 degrees before it executes the waveform that you desire, namely going from 30 degrees to 80 degrees. Okay, so it is not guaranteed that your initial state is always going to be equal to the desired state.
Okay, and the applied torque will just follow the same equation as that of the theta. Is it?
Correct, correct. Yes.
But there is no guarantee that both of them will be same.
If the system is stable, the error between theta and theta d will gradually reduce with time and go away. If the system is unstable, however, the error will only grow with time.
Okay, sir, I understood. And sir, I have another question. That
Yes.
in the previous class that you have
Ah,
said that in case of means in case of feedback control,
ah,
we can apply any torque by measuring the theta or the theta dot, right?
yes.
So in that case you have written it is proportional to sine theta or something.
Yes.
Then sine theta and sine theta cancel component will cancel each other. Then
Correct.
it will get the linear resistance. Sir, in that case also,
Ah,
can we apply any kind of torque, right? Means if we apply, let's say, the torque which is proportional to exactly theta dot, theta double dot, then
okay.
the theta double dot term will cancel from both the sides. Then there will be only theta dot component, means theta
Hmm,
dot terms.
hmm.
Can it also happen that if we want our motion to be um, only having velocity, not having acceleration,
In a
then
way,
can we?
yes. You can
Okay,
do it. You can sort of cancel that inertial term also if you want. Theta double dot term also you can cancel if you want. Okay. But often the practical problem, however, is in computing theta double dot. See, you can measure joint angles easily. How do you measure that joint acceleration, theta double dot, with minimal noise? See, if you that we'll talk about this problem of estimation today. Okay, theta may be available to you. Even theta dot may not be available to you. You will have to estimate it somehow. Theta double dot may be even more difficult. I mean, the errors in estimation will become larger as you take higher and higher derivatives of a particular signal. Okay, so in principle, yes, there is nothing preventing you from applying a torque which is proportional to theta double dot, which will get the other term also to go away. So instead of a first or second order system, you will have a first order system on your hands. It's perfectly fine. I mean, there's nothing preventing you from doing that, provided you can estimate theta double dot accurately.
yes, sir. So like that, we can cancel any term. No? Means the theta term
Absolutely.
can. Yes, sir.
Yes. So this is the benefit of feedback control. That's why I said the dynamics can be changed. You know, the dynamics not written in stone. If you have an unstable system, you can make it a stable system. If you have a stable system, you can improve the stability characteristics of the system. In other words, you can make the poles of the system become larger and therefore get a system to settle down quicker. So these are all the benefits of feedback. Okay, there is a cost, however, that is to be paid for all these benefits, which I have not talked about. Namely that sometimes if you want very good performance, you will need to have very fast responses for your actuators, for your motors and so on. Or sometimes when you want to, for example, generate a torque which is proportional to theta double dot, then theta double dot will be ridden with noise and you'll have to deal with that. So there are certain prices that price that needs to be paid for the magical effect that feedback control allows you to have on the system, but we will discuss that at a later point. Suffice it to notice now that we can change the system dynamics in whichever way we want. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. There's just one other point I wish to make. While you can measure theta, you can estimate theta double dot. Okay. Higher derivatives of theta, if you want to estimate, it is not possible to estimate it at this current time because of some a constraint called as causality. We will not get into that now. Maybe we will take a look at it later if time permits in another maybe a couple of weeks time. But theta double dot, I don't see any problems. You can estimate it and you can generate a torque in proportion to that. But the reason you don't do it is because of these practical difficulties. We will discuss some of them in today's lecture. Okay, so I think so any other questions, Subhadeep? Shall we get started with the class?
Yes, sir. I don't have any.
Okay, all right. So let me share the screen. So can you see my sheet of paper? Can someone please respond? Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So before we start to discuss today's subject matter, I just want to announce that I will be sending the next homework tomorrow. I had given you one homework in the previous week, and I had intended it to be a small homework. So that homework would be due this Monday at 9 a.m. and I will send a link for uploading that homework in due course. And then I decided to break up this material into two homeworks because this homework that I have given you now pertains to numerical solution to differential equations, which doesn't really gel very well with the subject that we are talking about now, namely state space based representation of a dynamic system, stability analysis of dynamic system, and subsequently its control. So the next homework will focus on these other topics, and I will try to send that across to you guys sometime tomorrow. Okay, so let us get started with today's topic. The topic is state observers. Then and two notions called controllability and observability. Okay, so I don't know if I'll be able to cover everything, but if I'm not able to cover one or another of the other two concepts, then we will take that up in the next lecture. Okay, so let us briefly recap what we discussed in the previous lecture. So we took an example of how pole placement can be used to transform an unstable system to a stable system, and also ensure that the poles of the stable system which capture the error dynamics, okay, which contain information about the error dynamics, can be placed wherever we want them to be placed. So pole placement was illustrated by means of a numerical example. Okay, then we talked a little bit about the centrality of this notion of a pole. In fact, from this point forward, as long as we are discussing linear control systems, poles are going to be our the main things that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so as I said, the reason that happens is because there are two important attributes to a control system. One is whether it is a stable control system or not, and that is determined by the sign of the real part of these poles. If the sign is positive, then we have increasing exponentials as responses to any initial condition or sometimes even certain inputs. Whereas if the real parts are negative, then you have decreasing exponentials, and that is characteristic of a stable system. So the poles contain information about stability. The second information that they contain is about the time scale in which your dynamic system responds to a certain stimulus. Okay, if I wanted to track a certain trajectory, if the waveforms have to change in a certain way, how fast would the control system be able to push my actual dynamic system to fall on that particular trajectory or that particular waveform and track it effectively from that point forward. So this information is also contained in the magnitude of the poles. In particular, we investigated this notion of a dominant pole, the one which has the least real part, okay, in magnitude. And we noticed that this is the slowest pole, and if the slowest pole's response itself is fast enough for us, then all other modes corresponding to higher, larger poles will die down much faster than the slowest pole, and therefore we will be able to get our system to respond in a time scale that is inversely proportional to the real part of that slowest pole's magnitude. Okay, so centrality of poles. But notice, however, that although the error dynamics of our, whether it be a feedback system or a feed forward system, would be of the kind e to the power at times e naught. Of course, it's very confusing here because I've used e everywhere. This e here represents error, and this e is 2.71828. Okay, so and this is the initial error. Okay, and therefore if this in the error vector e is, let us say, comprised of n elements, e1 to en, then each one of these elements, e1, will be a linear combination of terms of this kind. Okay, we really did not bother about these coefficients ci too much because we don't want the error anyway. So all we are interested in primarily is how quickly this undesired error between where my states are and where I want them to be, how quickly will that disappear. So I did not worry too much about these coefficients and did not talk too much about them. I focused steadfastly only on these lambda i's. Okay, and I wanted to be sure that they are large enough for the errors to die down quickly. Okay, so then we talked about feedback control, where if you have an open loop system that is unstable, we saw that the error dynamics results in the errors increasing as function of time between where you want your states to be and where they actually are. Okay, but fortunately it is not as if the situation is hopeless and beyond rescue. It is possible to rescue the situation by making measurements of the states. Okay, and then using those state measurements and applying such carefully calculated torques or inputs to my dynamic system that the whole overall system becomes stable. Okay, so this is the main idea behind this kind of control, namely feedback control. It's called feedback because you're investing in a sensor using its readout to take control action or to apply appropriate torque. Okay, so we wrote down the block diagram. So let us say there is a desired input that you need to apply based on, let us say, open loop control technique that we discussed earlier. Then this desired input passes through the B matrix, and that is fed to your dynamic system, your linear dynamic system. X dot is equal to AX plus BU, and out comes the states X, which are assumed to all be available for me to acquire using my data acquisition system. So then I take this X and then I compare it with the desired states wherever I want my states to be, XD, and any error between the two, this is the error E, is manipulated by means of a vector K, and added, maybe it is minus k times x, minus k times e. That's what is done, right? So there is a minus sign. With a minus sign, it is added to the u desired. Okay. So this closure of the loop is what makes this feedback control. So you are feeding back the output information to improve the performance of the overall system. Okay. And we saw that this could dramatically change the location of the poles. So your original system's poles are no longer going to be the poles of this particular feedback system. They can be dramatically different. In fact, they're completely in your hands as a control engineer. By choosing an appropriate k vector, you can place the poles of this overall system wherever you want them to be located. Okay. And we noticed how this idea can also be extended to nonlinear systems. So we considered, for example, our general serial kinematic manipulator, which had this kind of a equation of motion: c times x1 comma x2 times x2 plus g times x1 is equal to tau, and x1 dot is equal to x2. This was the equation. These were highly nonlinear and there was a lot of cross coupling, etc., etc. So if all you need to do is take a look at the 2R manipulator, which is about as simple as a serial manipulator can get, and you would appreciate how complicated this expression would be. But nevertheless, it is possible to control the system by generating a torque that looks something like this. Assuming that both x1 and x2 are available to you, all the joint positions, all the joint velocities are available to you, then you can do this, come up with this magical control law. Okay. So it is x2 d dot minus k1 times e dot minus k2 times e, plus you cancel these nonlinear elements by generating torques of exactly identical magnitude. Okay. What is E here? E is x1d minus, x1 minus x1d. Okay. The error between the joint variables and their desired values. Okay. And E dot is the error between the joint velocities and their desired values. And what we noticed was that the error dynamic satisfies this equation: E double dot plus k1 E dot plus k2 E is equal to 0. Here, these are all n by 1 vectors. Okay. So all the joint errors are strung together to form the error vector. And what this shows is that by choosing two scalars k1 and k2 appropriately, you can make all these errors go to 0. Okay. So, and at whatever rate you want them to go to 0. So that's completely in your hands, because these k1 and k2 are completely in your hands. Okay. And this technique of controlling a dynamic system using feedback, we called it as feedback linearization. Okay. In robotics community, this is called computed torque technique, computed torque technique or method or whatever. Okay. So I just want to, before we get started with today's subject of state observers, I just want to make a note of where we are headed. See, all this while we were concerned only about mechanical systems. We looked at rigid bodies, multiple rigid bodies, joints, and so on and so forth. But now, how do you implement this torque tau? You really need a computer. Okay, either an electronic circuit or a computer is necessary for you to generate signals and generate torques which are proportional to these nonlinear terms. Okay, so in practice, therefore, practically every feedback system is what you might call as a mechatronic system. Okay, there is a mechanical part to it, which is the robot or anything else, your car or your quadcopter or whatever else that you want to control. That's the mechanical system that you are interested in. But to control it, inevitably you make use of sensors which convert these mechanical variables of position, pressure, speed, speed, etc., into corresponding electrical signals. These electrical signals are then acquired by a computer, and the computer then generates a voltage which is proportional to these terms here. which is proportional to joint velocities and joint positions, and that is fed to a motor, which then generates the necessary torque. Okay, so a control system is always has at its center an electronic subsystem. Okay, our electronic engineers and computer engineers have made their systems so fast and so user friendly that we don't need to worry about by and large, we don't need to worry about the extra issues that are introduced by those systems. Okay, the non-linearities in terms of quantization, in terms of sampling, etc., are becoming less and less significant with improvements in computers and processing and so on and so forth. Okay, so what we can do is therefore simply focus on the mathematics. Okay, it look as though one has not brought in any of the properties of a motor or the properties or the limitations imposed by data acquisition and discrete time control that is only possible that a computer would be capable of, and so on. And that's because for most practical purposes, those non-idealities, those issues introduced by the electronic subsystem that would be part of the overall control system are so insignificant that we don't need to worry about them. Only when you are trying to implement this in practice will you need to confront those challenges. So we are not worrying about them, and we assume that somehow, as complicated as this torque expression looks, our computer is able to crunch this out and provide this exact torque to our physical system. Okay, so with that we can the technique that we discussed here, feedback linearization, can work its magic. Okay, however, there is one practical issue associated with implementing this very cool idea. Okay, and that is the availability of the states and the joint velocities. So for me to apply this particular torque, I have to have in real time. So at every instant of time at which I need to apply this torque, I need to have the state x1 available to me and x2 also available to me. x1 desired and x2 desired I know ahead of time, so I can store them in my computer. But x1 and x2 have to be made available to me at every instant of time. Now, often it is the case that we can measure x1 but not x2 accurately. Okay, what is x2? So our state vector was the set of joint positions, right? Joint coordinates q1 to q1 and their velocities, joint velocity q1 dot to qn dot, right? So this was our state vector x. Now, it is possible that we can attach sensors that can measure relative orientations between two rigid bodies, and therefore this q1 to qn can be easily obtained. But it is a lot harder to find sensors which can accurately measure the rates of change. Okay, so that is, if you look at it, it's a relatively simple problem. Why is it a relatively simple problem? Because if I have q1 to qn, you can say, well, I can always differentiate, q1 to, let us say I have q1 of t, okay, the first joint angle or whatever, okay, the first generalized coordinate. Okay, I can always differentiate this. But how do you do exact differentiation? It may not be possible, but because you're using a computer and so on, you can do come up with a difference equation equivalent of a differential equation, and then you can come up with a finite difference scheme to estimate the slope or the derivative of a particular signal. And so all these tricks can be done. So it appears on the face of it that this is not a major problem. But in general, it is not advisable to differentiate a signal. Okay. Even otherwise, even if you are not using a computer, there are electronic circuits that can do differentiation, which use what are known as operational amplifiers. But it is not a good idea to differentiate a signal. Why is that so? That is so because always on top of the signal that we are trying to measure will always be a noise riding on it. Okay, this noise could have fundamental origins. Okay, there could be some tiny vibration or something that you might not have taken into account in your model. So we have assumed that all our bodies are rigid bodies, but they will always have some flexibility. So when we are trying to move them from point A to point B, they may also vibrate a little bit. So that might contribute to the noise. That's one possibility. Then there is electronic noise. Okay, so the outside world is full of all sorts of electromagnetic radiation, and they can be picked up by your cables and so on, and that can result in noise. Okay, so in short, therefore, what I'm measuring, this electrical signal Q1 of, which is proportional to Q1 of t, also is unfortunately corrupted with noise. Okay, so if Q1 of t is, let us say, static, okay, it's not changing as function of time, you expect it to read exactly 0, but it never reads exactly 0. There will always be some fluctuation about that. Okay, and this is the noise n of t. So when I try to differentiate this signal, what am I doing? I'm taking this signal and I'm differentiating it. Okay, what is differentiation in very simple terms? It is taking the local slope of each of these things. Now, do you agree with me that the original signal had, what was the slope of the original signal? If it was flat, the slope was 0. That will also be flat, and actually not even a constant, it will be exactly 0. But we have this noise riding on top of it. So when I differentiate it, that noise gets differentiated. And if you see here, these changes are rapid, right? So the slopes will also be very, very large as a consequence of the fact that these signals are changing rapidly with time. Okay, so the signal, the noise, when I differentiate Q1 of t, the noise signal gets amplified significantly as a consequence of this differentiation operation. Okay, so even though I may be able to estimate the slope, okay, or the rate of change of Q as function of time by simply differentiating it electronically, in practice it is not recommended because noise gets amplified in the course of differentiation. Any questions about this? Okay, so what we therefore see is that as badly as we need these states x1 and x2 for us to implement this magical scheme of driving all the errors to 0 in a very transparent and controllable manner, we don't have the states available to us, the entire set of states x1 and x2 available to us. Okay, this is in the context of a multi-rigid body system, but you can also imagine other situations. So suppose a mechanical system is modeled as 2 springs and 2 masses. Okay, I may be, for practical reasons, I may be able to attach a sensor only to one of the masses, so maybe m1, and not to the other. So I may be able to measure the position of mass m1 alone or the position of mass m2 alone, but my full state equation will contain both m1, the position of m1, position of m2, and their derivatives with respect to time, or the velocities of these two things, none of which will be available to me. Okay, so as desperately as I need x1 and x2, in general, in practice, it is not possible to have x1 and x2 made available to the control engineer. So what is the control engineer to do? He has this wonderful strategy for control, but he is handicapped. He or she is handicapped because he doesn't have the full, they don't have the full state information. Okay, so that's where the first topic of today's lecture comes into play: state observers. So this is the engineer's answer to this unfortunate situation. Can we, by looking at only a subset of the states, only x1, okay, can we estimate the other states x2 without differentiating them? Okay, that is the goal of a state observer. Okay, and we want to estimate them because ultimately my goal is not to simply stop with estimating them. My goal is to make them available to the control engineer so that that engineer can implement this wonderful control law and get the errors to go to 0. Okay, so let us now see how this can be done. So we have to therefore modify the representation of a dynamic system somewhat. So all along we have just stuck to this representation: x dot is equal to ax plus bu. X were the states, the joint positions and velocities in case of a dynamic system, and U was the set of joint torques or joint forces, generalized forces essentially. Okay. Now, to acknowledge the fact that not every element of X is measurable or is available as a measurement to me, I invent a new symbol Y, which is a set of variables that I can actually measure. Okay, and they will be a subset of the actual states Cx, and that subset is captured by another vector which is called as C, which is usually labeled as C. Okay, so our actual dynamic system has this particular representation. U is the input, Y is the output. Okay, this is called as the output, because this is what I can measure. This is what the system spits out through its sensors. And U is the input, which is the handle, which is the lever that I have to control the states of my system. Okay, and I cannot, in general, access every single state. I have to somehow use the output to estimate the states. Okay, and that is the problem that we are going to be taking up now. Okay, so sometimes C, let us just look at what the structure of C would be briefly before we go forward. Suppose I have only one measurement. Okay, I measure only the orientation of that last joint. Okay, so then Y would be a scalar. It's a 1/1 vector, in other words. X, however, is still a n/1 vector. Okay, so what would C then be? C will therefore have to be a 1/n vector. It should be a row vector. Okay, so if I am measuring only the last joint variable and nothing else, then I would have 0, 0 all the way to 1. Okay, the last joint variable, the index associated with that nth term will be 1, and all the joint velocities I am not able to measure again. So all of those will also be 0. So this will be the structure of C if I am measuring only the last joint variable Qn. Okay, so if I am measuring all the joint variables but none of the velocities, then C will be of the kind. What will it look like? It will have, I think, 1. So I'll be able to measure all the joint positions. Okay, x1 up to xn, but not the joint or q1 to qn. Let me put it that way. Okay, what will C look like? C will be a matrix with this is x1, x2, or q1, q2, qn, and q1 dot all the way to qn dot. So I cannot measure q1 dot to qn dot. So all those entries will be 0. I can measure q1, so I'll have a 1 associated with that. So this will be a 1/n vector with the first entry being 1. The next, there will be a next row because I can measure q2 also separately. So that will be 0, 1, 0, 0, 0 all the way. So this will therefore be a n by 2 by n vector. Okay. So where you have these entries being 0, 0, 1, etc., etc., so that you capture the fact that q1 can be measured separately, q2 can be measured separately, and so on. And on the right hand side, Y will be a vector. It will not be a scalar. If you are able to measure all the joint positions but not the joint velocities. Okay. Any questions about the structure of C, given the kind of measurement that you are making of the system states? Okay. So now we have this available to us. Let us look at this problem. Okay, x dot is equal to ax plus bu, y is equal to cx, and I want cx without, I want x without measuring all its entries. It looks magical, right? X is a n/1 vector, right? So whereas y sometimes is just a scalar, but still it is possible to estimate all the elements of that n/1 vector using this scalar. How do we do that? Okay, so here is this wonderful way to do it. Okay, so I create a copy of this dynamic system in my computer. Okay, so in my computer I define states x cap whose dynamics is exactly the same as the dynamics of the actual physical system that I am trying to control. Okay, then the output y cap will be then equal to c times x cap. I create a model, a mathematical model in a computer and implement it. Okay, now what happens is that if I just do this alone, then you can, if you look at x cap dot minus, if you look at the error between the actual states, so the goal of doing this is x cap. Okay, the goal of doing this is to get the states x cap to eventually converge to the states x. Okay, the states x are actual physical states, joint velocities, joint positions, which are not joint velocities at least are not being measured. X, however, is a vector that is residing in a computer, which is proportional to the actual velocities and positions. Okay, I want x cap to become as close to x as possible in as short a time as possible, so that for all future time I will have x cap available to me, and I will then be able to use x cap for my feedback purposes, for my control purposes. Okay, so if I do this, then I can, what I need to look at therefore is the error E again, but this time between x and x cap. This is a metric which allows me to know how close I am, how close the states that are being estimated by my computer are to the actual states of my system. Okay, so if I look at the difference between these two, I have provided the same input, by the way, to both my physical system as well as to the computer model. Okay, so this is a computer model. Okay, now suppose I take the difference between these two, okay, which is x dot minus x cap dot. What do I get? That's equal to a times x minus x cap, and the bu term on both sides gets cancelled. That's it. Okay, so if I define x minus x cap as E, then E dot will be equal to a times E. This looks like a familiar equation, right? In the case of control also we came across a similar equation, but here the same concepts of stability are being put to use for a different purpose. Here we are trying to use the concept of stability to accurately estimate the states of this dynamic system in our computer. Okay, what does this tell me? If the eigenvalues of A, if A is stable, or A represents a stable system, what can I say about the error dynamics E? It is stable, or in other words, the errors will all tend to 0 as time t tends to infinity. E of t will go to 0. Okay, so what that tells me therefore is that if I have a stable system on my hands, then one way for me to estimate the states, even though I am not measuring all the states, is to create a copy of the same dynamic system in my computer and provide that dynamic system with the same input u. The initial state vector of my computer model may be different from the initial state vector of my physical system, but no matter, doesn't matter, because the error between the actual states and the initial states asymptotically go to 0 or tend to 0, because if A has only all its eigenvalues on the left half of the complex plane, you'll only have decreasing exponentials that will be part of the error dynamics. The errors change as function of time. So E will therefore be equal to sigma Ci ei of t, some C or Ej of t, Cij e to the power lambda it, where lambda I are all having negative real parts, so it will all quietly disappear as function of time. So after some time, if I wait long enough, how long should I wait? I should wait for a duration of time that is proportional to the inverse of the real part of the dominant pole. Okay, so if I wait for that period of time, then after that period of time, I will have my state x cap being very nearly the same as my state x, and with that I can go ahead and implement my control algorithm. Okay, so this is the idea, and this is called as a state observer. But before we prematurely, start to celebrate this achievement of being able to measure these, being able to estimate the states in a computer without actually having their measurements available to us, there is some important fact that we need to keep in mind. This idea will once again work only when A is a stable system. If it is not stable, then we are doomed. Okay, we will not be able to estimate the states. We will not be able to, get x cap to converge to x as time proceeds. Okay, so again we seem to be stuck in a sticky spot. But once again, the concept of feedback comes in to save the day. Okay, so suppose this computer model, if you see here, the input to this computer model does not take into account the fact that I'm making these measurements y. Okay, so this model here does not have y or x represented anywhere in it. It's a completely parallel model. The only input it is taken from the real physical world is the input u. Okay, so the model is being driven by the same input as the actual physical system. Other than that, there is no other input about the physical system that is taken by the model. Okay, suppose we make a small change to this strategy. Suppose instead of, so let us write down x dot is equal to ax plus bu, y is equal to cx, and then I have my computer model x cap dot is equal to a times x cap plus b times u, y cap is equal to c times x cap. This is the estimate of the output. Okay, now I am acquiring y, right? So can I put it to use in some way? So let us say in addition to this input, I provide another input which is proportional to y minus y cap. Okay, so which is proportional to y minus y cap. So I'm measuring y, I'm estimating y cap. If the two are not identical, I know there's a problem. I know then the states are x and x cap are not going to be identical. Y and y cap will be identical and the error between them will be 0 only when the states x and x cap are identical. So I therefore now use the concept of feedback. It is not real feedback because this entire thing is inside a computer. Okay, but nevertheless, I have measured y and I have estimated y cap in my computer, and I take the difference between the two and drive my dynamics with a term like this. Okay, so what is L here? It's a vector. Okay, you remember that all these are n by 1 vectors, right? So everything is n by 1 vector. Y, on the other hand, let us for the moment assume that we are making one a scalar measurement. Okay, then for that case, the vector L will be, it's actually a matrix, not necessarily a vector. It's a matrix generally. But if y is a scalar, this will have to be a n by 1 vector. So L will be of the kind L1, L2, all the way to Ln. Okay, so let us say we do this. We take the input, or take the measurement also into account and drive our model with a term that is proportional to the error between the measurement and the actual estimate of the same measurement. Okay, then how will the error dynamics look like? Okay, so we have therefore that x cap dot is equal to a times x cap plus b times u plus L times, I can replace y with c times x. So c times x minus x cap. And then y cap will be equal to c times x cap. Okay, now here is the physical system, here is the model, okay, with this extra driving term. So now they're not exactly copies of one another. There's an extra driving term that I have introduced in order to stabilize the dynamics, okay, of the error. So if I again define error as x minus x cap, then if I subtract these two equations, I see that x dot minus x cap dot is equal to a times x minus x cap, okay, minus LC times x minus x cap. Okay, or in other words, E dot is equal to A minus LC times E. Okay, so this is going to be the new error dynamics. And now, if you look at this equation, this is reminiscent of the equation that we wrote when we were trying to stabilize a physical system by using pole placement. Okay, there we had a term like E dot is equal to A plus BK times E. Okay, there the meaning of E was different. The E there was the error between the desired position and the actual position. The meaning of E here is something different. The E here is the difference between the estimated position and the actual position. Okay, but the role played by L in this game here is identical to the role played by the vector K earlier. Okay, it serves to stabilize the dynamics of this error and drive the error to zero at whatever rate we desire it to be driven to zero. So now we use pole placement to ensure that the eigenvalues of A minus LC are exactly whatever we want them to be. Okay, and that will ensure that as time t tends to zero, t tends to infinity, error goes to zero, or in other words, x minus x cap goes to zero, or in other words, x will go to x cap. Okay, again, this time t tends to infinity has to be taken with a pinch of salt. The actual time scale in which the error goes to zero, at time t will be on the order of 1 by real part of the smallest eigenvalue, real part of lambda 1. If you choose lambda 1 to be the smallest real value, lambda 1 is often negative, therefore we take the modulus sign. Okay, so if I wait that much, and lambda 1, remember, is completely in my hands. As a control engineer, I can choose such values of L1, L2, Ln, so on here, this vector L1 to Ln, that I can place my lambda 1 wherever I want in the complex plane. So if I place it far back enough, if lambda 1 is made quite large, a large negative number, okay, then the time scale in which the error goes to zero will be a very small value. Okay, much smaller than the typical response time of our dynamic system. Okay, then we will be able to get our x to be tracked accurately by the states x cap, and then we can implement our feedback control using the states x cap. Okay, any questions about this idea? This kind of this technique for estimating the states is called as this equation is called as a state observer, because it helps you to estimate the states or observe the states in some sense of the dynamic system. And notice that in doing this, we have not differentiated one half of the states. Okay, so Subhadip Sahu has a question.
Yes, sir. Sir, what is actually y? So we are measuring the y on part of the state. Like,
I couldn't understand your question, Subhadip. Can you please repeat it?
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, what is y?
What is y? Y is a vector of measurements. That's it. Okay, if I'm measuring only one variable, let us say the joint angle of the first joint, then y is just that joint angle alone. Okay, or whatever else that I'm trying to measure, it's just a vector that comprises whose elements are the measurements that I'm making. That's it.
So then the L that we choose, that will depend upon the variables that we measure, right?
I didn't get you.
So L, so that L.
L.
Yes.
Correct.
So
that the structure of L, is it?
Yes, sir. That will depend on y, means the variable that we measure, right?
Absolutely, yes. So let us say instead of making only one measurement, I make, let us say, n measurements. Okay, so small n measurements. Okay, then what will my, see, I know that my vector x is a n by 1 vector, right? So this is a n by 1 vector, and my y is, let us say, a small n by 1 vector. Okay, then what should L be in that case? It has to be a matrix. It has to be a n by small n matrix. so that so it is a vector only when I'm making only one measurement. Otherwise, it will be a matrix. Okay.
Okay.
But the message will remain the same, that because I can independently choose the entries of this small l or capital L, that matrix capital L, I can choose to position the eigenvalues of or the poles of A minus LC wherever I want, and I can appropriately select in a very simple manner the coefficients or the entries of this matrix L such that the the poles are of A minus LC are located wherever I want them to be situated. In particular, I want them to be large negative numbers, because in that case the error between x and x cap will very quickly go to 0, and then very soon I will have x tracking x cap tracking x. Okay. So now we have the states x cap available to us. We have to now make a modification to our control strategy. So earlier, our control strategy was x dot is equal to ax plus bu, and we choose earlier we chose u to be of the kind minus k times x, right? But as we discovered, x is not available to us, so we should choose u to be of the kind minus k times x cap. Okay, so then the equation will be x dot is equal to ax minus bk times x cap. Okay, and then y is equal to c times x. That will be the dynamic system. That's how the dynamic system is going to look like, assuming that I'm not providing any desired input. I don't want u to change as function of time. Otherwise, there will be a u plus u desired term here. I'm not taking that into account because I don't want to complicate the picture. Okay. So earlier we were looking at the eigenvalues of a minus bk, but now you see that a minus bk doesn't multiply x. Okay, well, a is multiplied with x and bk is multiplied with x cap. So it is natural for us to worry that this new variable, this new vector that we are using x cap for feedback purposes instead of the actual direct measurement x, will it affect the pole locations or our ability to locate the poles of our dynamic system wherever we want them to be situated? So that's a natural concern, right? Earlier we could choose k such that the closed loop poles of our overall dynamic system were exactly wherever we wanted them to be. So a minus bk had its poles exactly wherever we wanted them to be. But now we are not providing a minus bk times x. It's ax minus bk x cap. So will this change the location of those poles? What will happen to those poles as a consequence of not being able to directly measure x, but having to rely upon the estimate of x, which is x cap? So this is a question that we will answer next. Any questions about why we are looking why we are worried about the overall dynamics in this particular case?
Yes, sir. Sir, why that
Yes.
u equals to minus k x cap we put?
Why is it minus k x cap? Is it? See, earlier
Yes.
you had minus kx. You understood why we had minus kx, right? So that was because if a was unstable, or if a was stable but not to the desired extent, we could choose the entries of k such that the overall dynamics would be a minus bk times x, and those poles could be located wherever we wanted them to be situated. So the reason for choosing this control law was clear, right? However,
Yes,
but to implement this control law, or to generate torque which is proportional to minus k times x, I need to have the states x available to me. This measurement should be available to me. Okay, only then can I implement this control law. And we discussed that in general, not all the entries of the state vector can be measured and are available as measurements to me. And that's why we need to estimate those, the state vector. Okay, so we are implementing this because x is not available. All the entries of x are not available to me. Okay, only a subset of them are available to me, and therefore instead I estimate them all and then use them. Okay.
Okay.
Is that clear? Okay. So I want to implement the same technique of stabilizing my system, but I don't have x available to me. Therefore, I estimate it and use that estimated variable as part of my feedback control action. Okay, so if we have this, okay, then let us write x dot as ax minus bk times x cap. I'll write x minus x cap is the error e, right? For our dynamic system, we are trying to control it. So then I will write x cap as x minus e. Okay, then I would have that this is bk times x minus e. Okay, so in other words, x dot will be equal to a minus bk times x plus bk times error. Okay, and y will be equal to, of course, c times x. And the error dynamics between the observed states and the actual states we noticed was of the kind E dot is equal to A minus LC times E. Right? So now if I make a new state vector out of x and E, so let us say I take x and E and make a new state vector out of that, then the dynamics of that new state vector x dot and E dot will be given by a minus bk, okay, bk, okay, then E dot is only dependent on E, 0, a minus LC. Any questions about this? So I am doing this to understand what effect this new control law u is equal to minus k x cap has on the overall dynamics of my system, of my feedback system. Okay, when I'm using, I want to use state feedback, but states are not available to me, so I estimate them. So I do state estimate feedback instead of state feedback. This is what this is. I'm feeding back the state estimates. Okay, so what is the effect of that on the overall dynamics and the locations of the eigen locations of the poles of this first system? Okay, any questions about this? Okay, so it turns out that if you look at the structure of this is the dynamics of the overall system. Okay, where I have augmented the states x with the error between x and x cap, and that has this particular dynamics. And what this reveals actually is that it's an upper triangular matrix. Okay, of course, A and B are, I mean, A minus BK is itself a matrix. This is also a matrix, are all matrices, but this is an upper triangular matrix. Okay, upper triangular matrix of matrix entries. Okay, so for such a matrix, if it's an upper triangular matrix, you can show that, let us say this is A augmented or something, AUG. Okay, then determinant of lambda I minus AUG equal to 0 will give me all the eigenvalues of this overall dynamics, okay, of the observer and the new controller put together, new control system put together. It can be shown that if you are dealing with an upper triangular matrix, because the other entries here are 0, then determinant of lambda I minus AUG is nothing but the products of the determinants of the diagonal entries. That's it. Okay, so this is going to be equal to lambda I minus A minus BK. So this comes from linear algebra. Okay, times determinant of lambda I minus A minus LC. Okay, and that is equal to 0. So this equation is enough to reassure me on what the effect of incorporation of the estimate of state is instead of the actual state itself on the overall dynamics. So what this shows is that if I have an observer and a feedback controller together, then the eigenvalues of the overall system of augmented system is simply going to be the union of the eigenvalues of the controller. So because this has A minus BK here, so I have already chosen K such that A minus BK has its poles at some specified locations. And then I have chosen L such that A minus LC also has its poles at specified other locations. Okay. What happens is that this augmented system has its poles as simply the sum of, or not the sum, the union of the poles of this controller and of the observer. So if all the poles of the controller will be represented here, all the poles of the observer will also be represented there. So the overall set of poles is simply the union of all these poles. Okay. So the numerical values of none of these poles change as a consequence of using an observer to estimate the states and using that estimate to feedback to create my feedback signal. Okay. Any questions about this? So this very neat principle is called separation principle. I can independently design my controller and my observer without having to worry about the effect that my observer would have on my controller stability or the effect that my controller would have on my observer stability. The two are decoupled from one another, and that's why this is called as a separation principle. Okay. Any questions about this? Rajpal Singh has a question.
So is there any chance that the poles due to the state observer and controller overlap, and in the case that they lie on the imaginary axis, they might create oscillations in the system that were not previously present?
Well, the first point to note is that what do you mean by overlap? You mean they both have the same set of poles?
Yes, sir.
Well, if they have the same set of poles, why would that mean that they would be on the imaginary axis?
No, sir, I'm saying
the first thing to remember here. Pardon me.
So I'm saying
if they are on the imaginary axis.
Yes, sir. If there is a chance that it might happen.
Well, the answer to that question is that as a control engineer, you have complete control over where to position the poles of your controller as well as the observer. They are in your hands. You choose the entries of the K vector or the K matrix and the L matrix such that the closed loop poles of the dynamic system and the closed loop poles of the error dynamics of the observer are exactly where you want them to be. And if you are careful and you are a designer of any repute, you will be careful not to place them on the imaginary axis. You will want all of them to be placed on the left side of the imaginary axis. Okay, on the left side of the complex plane. So since it is completely in your hands, you can be sure that they are placed at whatever location you desire, and that location ensures that these are always stable. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any other question? Okay. So if you look at our development so far, it looks like we have sort of hit the end of the road, right? We noticed that this m of q times q double dot plus c of q comma q dot times q dot, etc., that could represent a very broad class of mechanical systems, of dynamic systems. Okay, all sorts of combinations of springs and masses and dampers, etc., could all be represented by equations of that particular form. Okay, and over the course of these few lectures, we have learned that given that general form, which represents such a broad, practically limitless class of mechanical systems, I have a control strategy which was given to me by feedback linearization, with which I can control every single one of them. Okay, so that's done. But then we discovered that to do that, we needed the states X. Then, at least for the linear case, we came up with a very clear, analytically watertight procedure to estimate the states X. Okay. So you have a very complicated system. You have a way of estimating the states. So why should I bother anymore? Why can't the study of control systems end with today's lecture, with the discussion of feedback linearization and with the discussion of state observers? That would be a natural question for all of us to ask, because between them, they take care of all our problems. Any dynamic system can be represented using the equations that we know, and we have feedback linearization that can control such a system. And we have a way to estimate the states. So there's nothing more that needs to be done. Can we not all go home and wrap up this course 1 month early? That would be a natural question and very high on your wish list, I'm sure. Okay. But unfortunately, there are many roadblocks that come in the way of realizing this dear wish of ours. Okay. So let me outline a few of them, because they set the stage for what we will be doing next. Okay. So the first problem is that, if you noticed the observer design, the observer was designed for a linear system, not for our original nonlinear system, of our multi-body dynamics system. Okay, multi-body system. Okay, you cannot, in a straightforward manner, design observers for nonlinear systems. So that's your first bad news. Oops. Although you want your joint velocities for the original nonlinear system, they cannot be made available to you in as rigorous a manner as they were made available to you for this linear system. Okay, so nonlinear observers cannot be designed. So nonlinear observers essentially are observers of states for a nonlinear dynamic system. Okay, cannot be designed in as straightforward a manner as linear observers. So nonlinear observers therefore are still a topic of research. Okay, linear observers, and you don't have a general formula like what we had with feedback linearization, which can help you estimate the states for nonlinear observers, estimate all the entries of a state vector. So this is the first problem. Okay, that casts a spanner in the works as far as your dream of stopping studying control any further is concerned. Then the second problem is that there are certain, sometimes this system, this dynamic system that you are trying to control is afflicted by certain diseases or pathologies. Okay, so there are some pathological dynamic systems which can sometimes not be controlled, and sometimes its states cannot be measured at all. Okay, even with your state estimator, it is not possible to, or a state observer, it's not possible to measure those states or estimate those states. Okay, so you have systems, pathological dynamic systems, whose states can either not be controlled or not be observed. The moment you cannot control the states or observe the states, you immediately recognize that you cannot implement your feedback linearization or state observer design for feedback control of your dynamic system. Okay, we shall take a couple of examples, very simple examples. These don't require very sophisticated examples to showcase them. Okay, so there are such systems as well, and for them this entire stuff that we have discussed is not going to work. Okay, all these neat techniques. Then the third thing, if you recognize the kind of torque that we applied in order to I'll just show the torque expression again. Okay, this expression here, in order, as part of our computer torque technique, do you agree with me that in addition to knowing x1 and x2, you need to know the numerical values of m of x1. So m of x1, in addition to having x1 and x2, is also dependent on the parameters, on the inertia, on some geometric parameters such as length and so on and so forth, right? So you need to know all of those parameters of your physical system accurately for you to be able to apply this exact amount of torque. Okay, so the model, the dynamic model of your system should have no uncertainties associated with them. I need to know my mass matrix m of x1, the structure of it precisely, and the entries also of it precisely. The only unknown will be x1, but which is being measured, and that will help me compute completely the matrix m of x1. Okay, similarly, I need to know the structure as well as the numerical values of this matrix C. okay, of the numerical values, the parameters of this matrix C, because the centrifugal forces are dependent on the distance of a certain rigid body away from the axis of rotation, of a certain center of mass away from the axis of rotation, and so on and so forth, okay, or the moments applied by these centrifugal forces at some joint location. So I need to know those geometric parameters and for me to estimate this correctly, okay, and the same is true with g of x1 also, okay, but often it is the case that I would not know the model very precisely. So one simple example where this modeling error can come in is in pick and place operation. So you think of your 2R manipulator as doing a pick and place operation. You have to pick up some object and place it somewhere else. Now this object could be a fairly heavy object. So what do I mean by saying fairly heavy? Its mass might be comparable to the mass of the links of this 2R manipulator, okay, but I may not know what exactly I am picking up, okay. My customer will not reveal to me what I may pick up. So my customer might be Amazon, for example, okay. Now Amazon wants to ship all sorts of parts to all sorts of people around the world. Some packets are small, or other packets are large. So there's genuine uncertainty about both the size as well as the mass of the object that this 2R manipulator has to pick up and place somewhere else, okay. So, and Amazon cannot tell me ahead of time, that they are going to only ship these particular boxes of this particular size and not anything else, okay. So both the moment of inertia as well as the mass of the object that is being picked up is uncertain, okay. If it is uncertain, then how on earth am I going to apply this neat computed torque technique, right? Because it depends on me knowing the mass matrix accurately. But because there's a big inertia at the end, whose value I don't know precisely, there's uncertainty in this mass matrix M. And the same uncertainty will also creep into the C term here, because that mass that is being carried will also experience Coriolis acceleration and centripetal acceleration. So associated with that will be some representation of that uncertainty in this C matrix also, and also in this G vector, okay. So as beautiful as this technique is, you need to recognize the fact that it works only when that mass that is being picked up and placed by the end effector is negligible compared to the mass of that object itself, mass of the robot itself, or the links of the robot, okay. So therefore this works, feedback linearization works only when the model of the dynamic system is known precisely, okay. And the last limitation associated with these neat techniques that we discussed once again can be revealed if you look at the dynamic equation, the torque, the equation of our system, okay. So we assumed here that on the right hand side I have some the vector of generalized forces. Now we assumed also implicitly that we have control over every single entry in this vector of generalized forces, but that was a very vain and arrogant assumption. I kept pointing to motors and torque and so on and so forth to create this illusion that everything on the right hand side is known and is under our control. But let us take, for example, a car, okay. So it is traveling down the road, and one of the terms on the right hand side will be the frictional force it will experience. It could also be the aerodynamic drag that it experiences. Now both these are not in my control, okay. I don't know what the road conditions would be. I mean, if I were in Bangalore, I wouldn't know what road conditions would be 10 meters from where I started my vehicle, let alone several kilometers away. So there is genuine uncertainty with some of the forces that my dynamic system is going to experience. The same is true for the aerodynamic forces as well. Those forces are heavily dependent on the direction of wind, the speed of wind, and so on and so forth, which keep changing, right? So therefore, our dynamic system can experience, inputs other than the ones that I intend to provide them. Okay, and those inputs are called disturbances. Okay, so if you have disturbances, once again you see that this neat technique of generating a torque will not work out, right? Because there will be terms here which I cannot control, and those they will excite my dynamic system in their own particular way, and result in a response which I did not intend or did not want the dynamic system to exhibit. Okay, so that's one other reason why this neat technique that we discussed so far using feedback linearization and so on doesn't work out. So feedback linearization and state estimation do not work as well as they do in the presence of disturbances. Okay, so both these, the points number 3 and 4 can sort of be brought under a single umbrella. They both capture the inherent uncertainty that you have either in the model of the system itself, as it is in the first case, or in the environment around it. Okay, and that is the second case. So these disturbances act on the system because of uncertainties in the environment, and disturbances and the model of the system itself is unknown because of the payload that could change in its weight and its inertia depending on what exactly is being picked and placed. Okay, so modeling uncertainties and disturbances together destroy our neat techniques of state estimation, along with non-linearity in the system, destroy some of our neat techniques that we have developed. Okay, so this observer along with state feedback work beautifully for systems that are linear. Okay, and where all the states can be estimated, but for all other cases you run into trouble, and that provides justification for us control engineers to keep chipping away and keep exploring new ways to address all these problems that exist. Okay, so let us now, nonlinear observers cannot be designed in a straightforward manner. That's a fundamental limitation. We have to throw up our hands. Okay, so we have to roll back our ambition. If you really want to control a robot, perhaps you have to have better ways of estimating joint velocities, maybe invest in sensors which can estimate joint velocities, or do this differentiation in a very clever way, maybe some band limited differentiation or some such thing which avoids the effect of noise, which minimizes the effect of noise. Okay, but the second one, however, we can at least come up with tests to check whether our dynamic system is of the pathological kind or if it's of the healthy kind. In other words, can we control it and observe it, or is it that some of the states cannot be controlled or be observed? Okay, so that is what we will look at next, and this is the topic of controllability and observability. Okay, the other two, taking into account uncertainties either in the environment or in the model of the system, will be the topic of maybe the lectures that would follow from now on. And for that we will be introducing a new set of tools. Okay, we will be using frequency domain based techniques for analyzing those effects for reasons that we will discuss also in the later lectures. But for now, let us focus on this pathological systems, pathological dynamic systems, which can either not be controlled or not be observed. And let me give some examples of that. Okay, any questions about the limitations of the techniques we have discussed so far before we go forward? Okay, so let us now shift our focus to these notions of controllability and observability. Okay. So, in fact, this controllability, the problem arises, in fact, partly because of the generality of the tool that we have developed or we have adopted for solving the control problem, namely the state space based representation of a dynamic system. As we could see in the previous example, where we wanted to analyze the stability of the overall dynamics of the observer and the controller put together, the state space formulation could give us such a transparent, straightforward way of integrating both these different bodies of knowledge. We had spent half a lecture discussing controller design and pole placement associated with that. We had spent the better half of today's class discussing observer design. Now, in one shot, I could simply concatenate or place one of these vectors above another to create a augmented state vector. That's what we did, right? Let me just flash that slide again. Okay, we created this augmented state vector. Okay, and that augmented state vector, could be analyzed, and we could obtain the eigenvalues of that augmented state vector. So effortlessly, I could integrate two subsystems which were earlier modeled separately by using the framework of state space based representation of a dynamic system. Okay, but this unfortunately also proves to be a double-edged sword. Okay, so let us take one simple example where that is so. Okay, let us take, for example, two pendulums. Okay, this is pendulum 1, its joint variable is θ1, and beside that is another pendulum, and it's also oscillating, and it's this is maybe M1, that's M2, this is L2, this is L1, so two very different pendulums. Okay, but I can actuate the first pendulum by means of a torque tau, okay, but not the second one. Okay, I don't have a way to actuate the second one. Now, what will the differential equation, what will be the state space representation for the first pendulum be? So our x1 will be θ1, x2 will be x1 dot. So I will have x1 dot, x2 dot to be equal to 0, 1 minus g by L1 0 times x1, x2 plus 0, 1 tau, because I'm able to actuate, apply a torque tau, and that can influence my state x2 and x1 in this particular manner. So that would be the dynamic equation of my first dynamic system. The second dynamic system, okay, what will its equations be? Let me call x3 as θ2. Okay, that particular joint variable, generalized coordinate, and x4 as x3 dot. Okay, in which case I would have x4, x3, x4 dot is equal to 0, 1 minus g by L2 0 times x1, x2. Okay. Now, let us say, simply because the framework allows me to combine these dynamics in a very straightforward manner, I blindly go ahead and combine them. In other words, I define a new state vector x, which is, the concatenation of, or not I have just placing one on top of another, the states x1, x2 and x3, x4. I create this new state. I can do it because mathematics doesn't say no. Okay, then what will be the dynamics of this state vector? So x1 dot, x2 dot, x3 dot, x4 dot will be equal to, okay, I just need to enter the the entry 0, 1 minus g by L1 0. The other entries will be 0 here, and then I'll have another 4 zeros there. I'll have 0, 1 again here, minus g by L2 0. Okay, times x1, x2, x3, x4 plus what will be the input vector 0, 1, 0, 0, because the second system is an autonomous system. There is no input to the system. Okay, times the vector, the scalar tau. So this also, if you see, has the same structure as these ones. So this is A, this is B, this is X, This is x, so I will have x dot is equal to ax plus bu. Very similar structure as this one. But there's a fundamental difference in what you can accomplish with this compared to what you can do with that. Okay. I could change my theta 1 and theta 1 dot in whatever way I wanted by choosing an appropriate torque tau. I could do that. I could define a theta d and make sure that the theta d is achieved by means of feedback or feed forward or whatever other technique I wish to adopt. Okay. But can I do it for this particular case? Can the same torque tau also affect my state theta 2 or the state theta 2 dot, which are x3 and x4? No. This torque only actuates this pendulum. It does nothing to that pendulum. But this particular framework, this mathematical framework, doesn't stop me from combining the dynamics of these two completely different physical systems, unconnected with one another, to make a big, new physical system. But the truth still remains that even for this new physical system, I cannot control x3 and x4 by changing tau. Okay, so this system is one where the state vector x1, x2, x3, x4 cannot be controlled. Okay, this definition of what it means to control a state vector will make it a little bit more precise in a while. Okay, but the fact remains that a few of the entries of this vector are not in our control. I cannot influence them. They will evolve the way they want. Okay, if I release this pendulum with a certain initial position and initial velocity theta 2 and theta 2 dot, its response will grow as function of time in a manner dependent only on those two parameters, nothing else. Whatever I do, whatever torque I apply has no effect on them. Agreed? So this system therefore is not controllable. Big drawback, because I thought initially that I could place the eigenvalues of my overall system wherever I wanted. Here is a big blow to that. I cannot place eigenvalues wherever I wanted, wherever I want for this particular system. Because if I could, it means then that I can affect the dynamics of my second subsystem also, but I cannot do that, right? So this system is not controllable. Okay, intuitively it is clear why it is not controllable. Any questions about this?
Hello, sir. There
Yes.
are two independent systems, first
Yes.
one and second one. So first independent system we can control, and for the second independent system we cannot control.
Correct.
So, but combining them, sir, means why we are combining them? Actually?
Well, I took this as an example to showcase the weakness of state space based formulation of the dynamics. Okay. Why am I combining them? Because nothing is preventing me from combining them. If we will take more concrete examples where in an actual physical system, let us say you have a n-link manipulator and you don't have a motor for one of the links. Okay, can you control the orientation and position of that link independently? No, right? So that's another more practical example where the system will be rendered uncontrollable. Okay, but this was a toy example which I picked to show that my framework allows me to combine systems in such a seamless manner that on the one hand it's an advantage because I can analyze the dynamics of this overall interconnection in a very using the same machinery. But on the other hand, it's a disadvantage because it sometimes allows me to combine systems which are completely unconnected with one another, and therefore creates this illusion that I will be able to control the other system also, while in truth the other system has no relation to the first one. Okay, so that's the lacuna, that's the drawback of this way of formulating the dynamics of the system. Okay, a second example. Let us come back to the same pendulum and then I'll stop. Okay, let us say I have the same pendulum, two pendulums. Okay, this is theta 1, that is theta 2. Okay, I can influence theta 1 by means of this torque tau. I cannot influence theta 2, but suppose I can measure theta 2, okay, but not theta 1. Let us say I can neither measure theta 1 nor theta 1 dot. I can only measure theta 2. So I know that my concatenated system x1, x2, x3, x4, its dynamics is going to be something like this, right? 0, 1 minus g by L1, 0. All the others are 0 here. These are also 0 here. This minus g by L2, 0. So when I combine them, this is how it's going to look. And then plus 0, 1, 0, 0, tau. Okay, this is how it's going to look. What is the output going to look like? If all I can measure is only theta 2, what is theta 2? x3, right? So my output will look something like this: 0, 0, 1, 0 times x1, x2, x3, x4. I can only measure theta 2. Okay. Now also there is a problem. If you see here, when I have to control my system, of course my torque tau can influence theta 1. But let us say I want to convert this system from a marginally stable system that it is now to a fully stable system with both its eigenvalues on the left half of the complex plane. I need to use feedback. But what do I have available to me for performing feedback? I don't have all the states x available to me. I only have my measurements. And what I'm measuring is not theta 1, but instead theta 2. That's the only measurement available to me. Okay. Now, can I use theta 2 to influence the dynamics of theta 1? Even though I can change the dynamics by means of the torque tau, to influence the dynamics or to influence the location where the poles are situated for this system, I need theta 1 available to me. But my state vector y only gives me theta 2. Okay. And intuitively you understand that even if I want to come up with a very fancy observer and blah, 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 it is not going to help me get theta 1 because these two are completely unconnected systems. It is just that this, this framework allows me to combine them in this particular manner. But that combination throws up these unique, challenges, unique problems that one needs to confront. Okay. So this kind of a system, okay, where I cannot observe all the states or I cannot reconstruct the entire state vector from the output measurement is called as an unobservable system. Okay. So if I cannot change the states in the manner that I wish to, that system is said to be not controllable. If I cannot change the, if I cannot estimate the states of the system from the measurements that I make of the states, then such a system is called as an unobservable system. Okay. It is always good. So these are both pathological situations. Okay. So for example, if I have a multi-link manipulator, I hope that by making a few measurements, I'll be able to reconstruct the other measurements, but that may not happen. It may not be possible. So I may have to have sensors at every single joint. Okay. Likewise, if I want to control this manipulator, I may have to have motors at every single location. And if not, I will not be able to control it. So therefore, I need to have a way to judge whether my system is observable or controllable. If it is observable, then I need to be able to separate the observable part of the system and the unobservable part of the system. In this case, the observable part of the system is this one. The unobservable part of the system is that one. I need to be able to separate out the dynamics such that I know which ones I can observe, which ones I cannot. Similarly, if the system cannot be controlled, I need to be able to separate out those states which can be controlled from those which cannot be controlled. So I first need to judge or decide whether I am stuck with such a diseased system, a system which is not observable or not controllable. And if I am, then how do I divide up? How do I excise, in some sense, the cancerous part, the diseased part, the part that cannot be controlled or the part that cannot be observed? How do I do that in a systematic manner, given that the state equation would look something like this: x dot is equal to ax plus bu and y is equal to cx. Okay. So to take these decisions, to tell me the health of my dynamic system in some sense, from the points of view of observability and controllability, there is something called as an observability matrix and a controllability matrix. Unfortunately, we are done with the class today. We will discuss them in the next class. Thanks a lot. So if you have any questions, you can ask me now. So I'll just write down. This will be the starting point for next week's lecture: observability matrix and controllability matrix. They can be used to judge whether the dynamic system represented in this particular form is fully controllable and fully observable or not. Okay, so we'll stop here. Any questions? Okay, so I see that there are no questions, in which case we shall stop today's lecture at this point. Thank you. See you on Tuesday.